Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Mantar, Post-Apocalyptic Depression, out February 14th on Metal Blade Records. The album has 12 tracks, 36 minutes in length, and this is the band's 6th full-length studio album. They are a German sludge band. From a design standpoint, I think this album is not only a representation of the record itself, but it's also a representation of the band. It's also about a band that understands the type of record that they're building and how best offer it to their fan base or to anybody who wants to listen to it. Understanding that this is an album that sound-wise is going to be very rugged, very raw, allowing the record to feel short or to perhaps feel even shorter than what it is, it's the best course of action. 12 songs, 36 minutes, you blink, the album is done. A perfect record for this new generation that has a very short attention span. But when you understand the dynamics of the album, making the record feel more compact, more condensed, if you will, while still making the record dynamic and engaging is the perfect solution for a record like this. Because it allows you to see the forest from the trees and also doesn't allow itself to be overbearing on the listener. It feels fresh, it feels rejuvenated every time you finish it. You're able to go back to the beginning and enjoy it all over again. From a track listing perspective, the only song that I feel like it has a reserved spot is Cosmic Abortion, the closing track. The dynamics of that song, the design of that song, what that song offers musically really forces that track to be at the end of the album. All the other songs you can move it around, the dynamic of the record would not change. The album has that sort of fluidity to it, and it's that kind of a dynamic album that could morph into a record regardless of how these songs present themselves. Because once again, 12 songs, 36 minutes, it doesn't allow the album to change that much of its own dynamic by moving some tracks around. So it has great quality across the individual songs, and then obviously the duration, the length, gives it great quality across the collective. As far as the sound on the album is concerned, like I said, it's a rugged record, a raw sounding album. They minimize the production from the last record to this one and allows this album to feel live. This feels like a live record. The way it comes across, the way it sounds, it's almost built like a set. And that to me has great quality, or adds great quality to the performance of the album and to the performance of the songs. And they were not afraid of mixing ideas or mixing influences. Because when you listen to this record, you're going to hear punk, you're going to hear rock, you're going to hear blackened elements, you're going to hear sludge. I even feel like you're going to hear some grunge. This might upset some people, but it's true. There are some elements in there. But they all disguised in this Mantar sound, which allows the song to have uniquenesses from track to track, but at the same time, they all feel very blended into one another. The aggression of the record is something that's also very consistent from top to bottom. But a lot of the aggression of this album also comes from that unpolished feel, from that less produced approach that this record has. And when you start to really look at this band and what they've offered us throughout the previous 5 albums and what they've offered us live, having a record that feels a lot more edgy, that feels a lot more rugged, that feels a lot more unpolished, it describes the band a lot better. It allows for the sound on the album to feel a lot more natural, a lot more organic, almost like the band is performing in your very own living room. To me, this is always a great way of putting a record together, especially when you talk like a band that has such chemistry, that has such live essence. Allowing that to come across on an album is a winning formula. And then you have some incredible dynamics throughout this record on a song-by-song basis. The coordination between drums and guitars on this album offered me uniquenesses that I hadn't seen from the band previously. When it comes to the guitar sound, I felt going with that more unpolished production approach definitely gave this album a different experience. It gave it a more organic feel. It gave it more of a natural vibe, almost like the entire guitar sound on this album was just part of a very long jam session. It didn't feel contrived, it didn't feel worked on, it rather felt spontaneous. And having a spontaneous guitar sound adds great qualities to the songs because it gives it very individual touches at every single turn. When you move on to the drum sound, this is one of the best drum sounding albums from Mantar. It also reminded me of some of my favorite Sonic Youth records as far as that drum sound is concerned. When I was growing up listening to Sonic Youth, the way the drums sounded on some of their records had a very unique fingerprint, had a very unique, distinct approach, which is not always the case. You always gravitate to what the guitars offer in terms of uniquenesses. You're not always necessarily looking at what the drum sound gives you. On this record, I was almost transported back in time to some of those albums from Sonic Youth that are still in high rotation for me. And I felt like they took a different approach sound-wise from the drums to really compensate that lack of production as far as the guitars, and then obviously the impact that it has in the overall soundscape of the album. The vocals bring that unhinged perfection to the aggression, to the intensity that the sound already has. I love the vocal performance on this record. I love the sense of just being completely on the edge and about to lose it on every single song. And then I love some of the attributes that they give to some specific tracks, using some backing vocals, some layers, in order to once again create a live vibe, because that live vibe already exists in the sound, so they create that on a vocal standpoint, which it almost makes you feel like there are people there listening to the performance and singing along with the band. It creates that synergy that's really interesting, and I think once again it adds to that overall live experience that this album really captures. There's also moments in certain songs where the vocals feel a lot more distant from the sound itself versus being almost inside the sound, which is a unique characteristic of this band. So while the vocals feel very consistent and are connected with what we've come to expect from Mantar, some of the subtlety approaches that they took throughout the album really created some interesting dynamics that have not necessarily always been there for this band. When you put all of this together, these are the best 36 minutes that I've heard from this band in a very long time. It's really a nice record. It's a great listening, and it's a great album to experience in your home and almost close your eyes and pretend that you're watching them live. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Rex Perverso. Such a cool guitar riff. This song has such a cool riff. It's one of those riffs that feels heavy without being heavy. It just feels that it has heaviness to it, but it's not necessarily a heavy sounding riff. The ability to have that dynamic really sets this track apart. It allows you to have this almost dirty rock sound as far as that riff is concerned. And then you have the vocals that add to that overall dirty experience that this track offers. It adds a little bit more grit into this song. The chorus really stands out on the track. It's a little bit more groovy. I'm not going to go as far as to say that it's more melodic, but it definitely stands out. It has its own uniquenesses to it, and it's memorable, which allows the song also to feel complete from that standpoint, because it has a sound that really catches your attention, but then it also has a chorus that magnifies that ability to catch your attention. I love some of the vocal layers that this track offers, giving it size, giving it texture, giving it volume, once again bringing that live experience into the studio. Then we have Morbid Vocation. The opening feedback on this track is something that you're going to hear in a few tracks on this album, and I love that because that is also a live element. It's something that you experience when you listen to a band live, specifically when it comes to Mantar. So including that feedback at the beginning of the song, it adds to that vibe, it adds to that experience, it gives that aroma to this track. It brings this punk grunge sound in the forefront once the song starts to develop, once you start to go beyond that feedback into the track itself. It's a track that has a little bit more room between where the vocals are and where the sound is. This allows the vocals to feel more impactful because they're not as weaved into the overall sound of the song. The two feel a lot more apart, and being a little bit more apart for a track like this, it also adds a sense of darkness to it, which is a great element because it matches well in terms of creating ebbs and flows to the more intensive and aggressive chorus. That's a complete separation to that more sense of darkness that the verses hold. Great melodic, really melodic guitar, dark riff closes off the track or leads you to the closing of the song, and that was such a nice little touch of such great guitar playing that just added a sense of almost melodic blackened rock and roll to the overall feel of the track, which also piggybacks off of that overall darkness that the track really hides it well in the verses. Last but definitely not least, the song that I mentioned already, Cosmic Abortion. The moment I heard this song, I thought about Thunder Kiss 65 by White Zombie. Not to say that this song mimics it or duplicates it or tries to replicate, but it's impossible to hear one and not think of the other. The style of grooviness that the guitar riffs have on Thunder Kiss 65, you're going to get that same sort of psychedelic, groovy, dark melody coming across on the guitar riffs and how they interact with the overall drum sound on this track. It's a sound that creates this minimalistic version of itself in terms of what groove can add, what darkness can add to a song. I love the originality of that riff, the ability that it has to transport me back to a different track, bring some of the aroma that track have, but then give it a Mantar spin and offer it under a different vision and under a different umbrella. I really like the way this song closes off the record because it's a track that has a different sense of consistency, a different sense of heaviness, a different sense of aggression, a different sense of size. It just has elements in it that you don't really find throughout the entire album until you get to Cosmic Abortion right at the tail end. Well, I should say the end itself, because it's the closing song. This is it. Mantar with Post-Apocalyptic Depression, out February 14th on Metal Blade Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.